Hey, Allison, you can stop sharing now. We'll go ahead and get started. All right, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon to you all. I appreciate you guys coming. This is the first in a sixth part of AI lecture series discussions. It's very informal discussion, but it's basically a way that we can explore artificial intelligence here at MacU. It's not going to be just about learning what AI is. The goal is to inspire and imagine together how we can thoughtfully put AI into your teaching, the classrooms, and even campus operations with the goal of how can we better serve our students. And so to help us start this journey, I'm honored to welcome Nicolas Gertler. He is the founder and CEO of Mylon. He's a student at Yale University, and I thought it was important for us to hear from a student perspective because we all have here IT professionals, but he gives us a unique perspective with his work with AI, both as a student and innovator. And I look forward to hearing from his experiences and his vision. And when I talked to Nicolas, we email back and forth. If you have questions during his talk, feel free to ask questions. Like he doesn't mind stopping, and then we'll have time at the end to ask questions as well. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Nicolas, and you can go ahead and get started.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. For context, if you have any questions, I can't, if you could raise your hand on Zoom, like the sort of emoji, or if you could, Jody, if you could just let me know.
Yep, I'll take care of it.
Awesome. Well, first of all, just wanted to just give a little bit of bio about myself. So I started actually getting involved and engaging and learning about AI about 5 years ago. So this was kind of chat GPT boom, before kind of everyone was talking about it. And I watched a YouTube video and I became really interested. And this YouTube video talked about all different types of predictive AI that kind of exists in today's society. Things as small as, the Netflix recommendation algorithm, to, machines trying to determine if a plant is ready to be picked. The AI has been integrated in different forms in many ways for decades now. The kind of boom that we're seeing now is an advent in not predictive AI, but now generative AI. So the ability for these tools to kind of create content, whether that's text, audio, images, or video. And the core kind of part of that is, of course, in the text format, which is why kind of chatbots are so common today. So I'm going to be focusing just throughout the talk on different forms of generative AI, primarily. A little bit more about myself, though. I started a company called Mylon about almost 2 years ago now, and we've partnered with Yale and other higher education institutions to build AI tools or AI platforms that augment teaching and learning, things that essentially make it so, like, you have your textbook that a student is going through, and an AI kind of is able to have full awareness of that conversation, walk students through the content step by step, so they kind of can't just ask for the answer. It's really grounded in a lot of the research I've done in learning sciences, which I'll share some more about in a moment. At Yale, I serve as the Student AI Ambassador for the Poorvu Center for Teaching and Learning. So it's our CTL at Yale. I started as a freshman and kind of got into that role actually just through a cold email, just reached out as a freshman. Before that, I'd advised the US Secretary of Education under the Biden administration on student priorities for AI integration. And the reason I did that was because I sort of authored a policy framework around responsible AI integration in around May 2023. And kind of to expand on some more of my experience in research, a lot of my research focuses on how can we embed pedagogical principles into AI platforms. So like the Socratic method, or constructivist-based learning, or even problem-based learning, things like that. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. So excited to bring that experience of a student, of a kind of developer, and a user. So in terms of generative AI, we've seen, right, just this advent of ChatGPT. So many students are using it, faculty as well, administrators, and just people across all domains around society. And I kind of just wanted to start by giving my pulse, or sharing my pulse on kind of where we are today. So kind of at the beginning of, when there was that kind of ChatGPT moment, insofar as when, millions of people started picking it up. This was sort of, it was released in November, kind of, I think November 2022. And then it was, really picked up steam and around the spring. And since then, the kind of AI tools have improved dramatically. But with that, even at the kind of onset, but especially now, students have been using it for everything. And I kind of just wanted to share this, right? How kind of omnipresent it is. There's some statistics on this, some research online that shows that a lot of students are using it, especially in kind of in secondary education and even kind of primary education when they do have homework. Um, but I think it's, if I had to kind of guess, it's most rampant in higher education. And I think it's unfortunately being used in very irresponsible ways by students to completely supplant the entire critical thinking process. When instead we need to harmonize on a way to use AI to kind of take out the busy work, the things that really aren't useful, and ensure that the kind of students' critical thinking is at the forefront. Um, so one of the things at Yale that we've done is we've created an AI guidance page for students as well as one for faculty. And they essentially lay out these principles of how, kind of AI can best be utilized for students. So, I was a kind of co-author in this document. And one of the things that we, really were keen on sharing is that students can use this as a study guide. As a tool to help them study, not to replace all the other methods they have maybe with flashcards, but as an additional sort of tool. And what that looks like kind of in practice is, let's say I have a exam for my cognitive science course, and, it's kind of a free response and a multiple choice assessment. What I can do is I can upload, some of the slides with, of course, the instructor's permission, ensuring, kind of follows all copyright rules and regulations, and which generally is fine if they're the custom made professor slides and they consent to it. Versus, kind of other instances. But anyway, professor allows me to upload the slides, or I can maybe just upload my own notes. And then I can ask the AI tool, let's say it's ChatGPT, hey, can you please create 10 questions for me, 10 multiple choice, 10 free response, right? So that I can practice. And I think this is a really positive way for students to utilize AI, because they're able to use it to just enrich their learning experience, and they're still doing a lot of the heavy lifting of the critical thinking. Um, on the faculty side, kind of this is my pulse based off conversations with a lot of faculty at Yale and other schools, is that they're also using it. And they're using it for things to do things like grade, um, and kind of sort of give feedback more efficiently. And I'll kind of talk more about how I think we should shape that as well as the student side shortly. But lastly, I think on the administrative side, it's also being used, to help expedite reports, to help expedite emails, right? To just streamline different processes. And the core thing that I really kind of, just a principle, especially on the operational administrative side, is just ensure that there's enough kind of instruction and content being given to the AI so that I can accurately, or kind of perform the task well, I should say. The reason I say that is because the temptation, especially if you use it a lot, is just oh, let me just kind of give minimal content or minimal prompt, but really kind of enriching that prompt will really go a long way in producing better results, even if that takes an extra 1 minute up front when you're first engaging with it. So that's kind of on the operational and administrative side, right? It's kind of use cases there, and I'm happy to answer more questions about this more specifically, diving in kind of more micro into how I've seen it being used. But now shifting back kind of to the teaching and learning side. One of the things that I've thought a lot about is kind of today's modes of assessment. Um, and of course, the essay is a very common mode of assessment, multiple choice and free response, kind of on paper assessments. All these assessments are decent, right? They've done the job up until now. But unfortunately, they are not really withstanding the tide that is kind of, or the wave of AI, I should say. And what I mean is more particularly to hone in on the student essay. There are a lot of students who are using AI to write their essays. And in many instances, it can be really, really clear. They may even include, the prompt at the top. Other instances, it can be a lot more nuanced. Really kind of depends how the student prompts and works with the AI. But the interesting thing is, it is a kind of, in some sense, a form of critical thinking when you're working with the AI, but it's not, generally what the course is kind of expecting in terms of the skills that are being developed. And I think what this does is it, causes us to rethink the different modes of assessment that we're kind of using. So one really interesting new way of assessing students is really focusing more on the process over the product, right? So generally, with the essays, just the final version is evaluated, or maybe a draft or two before. But in thinking about how we, redesign assessments, there's been a suggestion about, rather than grading just the final thing, grading the chats, right? So let's say you're asking the student to co-create, a presentation or a report, and you actually want to test their AI skills, right? So if this is a sort of, if the learning goal is about AI, or even just about kind of collaboration and, kind of even just kind of the core goals of the assignment, what you could do is you could ask the student to engage in a conversation with AI and steer it right through many different turns or many different questions and prompts that you give it over, say, a 30-minute or hour period. You can have it guide it towards the, whatever the assignment may be. And this is kind of testing AI literacy skills, right? And AI literacy is, of course, just, sort of broader version of media literacy, I would say. Um, but essentially, yeah, you can essentially empower professors to grade the chat. And I think this is really interesting because it's able to show how students' sort of critical thinking evolves throughout the course of the conversation, rather than just kind of only focusing on that end result. And of course, that end result can still be factored into the grade. Um, but I think it's really important that, the process is really emphasized as well. Of course, in thinking about how, alternatives for the student essay, a lot of professors have opted to do, in-person Socratic method conversations, which I think are really useful, right? Because a student um, you know, can't, commit a form of academic dishonesty if, if it's just like one-on-one having a conversation, right? They can't, ask ChatGPT on their glasses, right? That's not a thing, fortunately, yet. Or but anyway, so, we're seeing a lot more of these kind of in-person conversations in different classrooms, right? Ensuring that students can really be tested on their ability to, let's say, like it's about, reading comprehension, about, content in the book. Have the professor will, walk students through, their understanding, um, and ask them questions, right? And that's kind of more illuminating if they actually did and understand the reading than, the essay, right? Because it's live, it's raw, and it's there. But of course, doing things like oral discussions is hard, large scale, larger classes, I should say. So, there have been, kind of prototypes introduced of tools that essentially use voice AI agents. So if you've ever spoken to ChatGPT, you notice you can have a conversation, and it sounds actually pretty fluid. Um, and I think it's really interesting because you can essentially assign students to talk with a voice AI agent, and then as an instructor, get back the transcript, right? And then you're kind of able to grade it from there. And it kind of follows the same principle that I was saying with the Socratic method of having a raw, authentic conversation, right, without being able to go and ask ChatGPT, right? Um, so I think all of this conversation about assessment redesign and just, thinking about learning has really, brought to the forefront what skills are important to impart to, students in higher ed and just in kind of all of education. I've thought a little bit about this, and I think it comes down to more of these soft skills like creativity, being able to be high agency, taking initiative, being dynamic, and most importantly, being willing to kind of grow with the new tools that are emerging. Of course, there's a lot of worries at all institutions about, if students are, aptly being prepared, right, to enter the workforce. And there's a lot of conversation about if we should integrate, AI classes, that teach you AI, then other classes that have AI. And, I think the answer is yes. I think we should be teaching more about AI in classes. Professors should be encouraged to use it. And, importantly, students and professors should be encouraged to have open discourse about it, right? Have this culture of transparency rather than it being sort of this combative thing. And I think, it's interesting to think, to talk with students as well, right? See what they think and how they're using it. Because, many students have found good and, kind of academic integrity informing ways to use it. And they can kind of share that, which can be used to enrich instruction or just kind of the general culture around AI use. But on the note of, right, integrating AI, I certainly think it should be something on the top of everyone's minds, because I think it can make things a lot more efficient, reduce a lot of this busy work, and really kind of push the ceiling, right, upwards. So yeah, that's kind of what I had prepared for the talk, but would love any questions or comments or anything at all.
You don't have any questions? If not, I guess. Nicholas, I'm interested. You're taking like probably quite a few classes at Yale. How are you seeing potentially instructors creatively using it in your classes in different ways? And then we also have a large online population of students. And what are your thoughts on how to engage that student um, using AI other than just discussion posts or things like that to enhance that learning process?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of those are great questions. In terms of how it's being used by some of my instructors, um, for example, I was in an English class 2 years ago, and the instructor, kind of opened the conversation with students about how are you using AI? How do you think we should be using it? And through that like she didn't come in with this, the professor didn't come in with a kind of agenda of this is how I want it to be used. She really focused on opening up the conversation to the seminar, right? So it worked that it was a smaller class. And she essentially, based off that conversation, decided that it would be, beneficial kind of use case to have students, say input their essays into ChatGPT, ask for feedback, um, and what are the strengths and weaknesses, how, what are counter arguments that maybe I didn't consider, and then the students then receive that feedback, and rather than asking ChatGPT to implement it, they implement it themselves, right? So that was a really interesting use case. I think another really interesting use case that I haven't experienced personally, but I've kind of heard, is kind of on the programming side, the computer science side. Um, you know, um, Programmers are using it to kind of organize their notes, right, rather than just sketching things on paper and stuff, and kind of having this like hazy mental model um, of kind of what they're building. They can use it to create a kind of more structured document that really helps them produce that deliverable. In terms of how to engage the online population, it's a really good question. I think, how can you do? I'm not sure if it's synchronous or asynchronous, but if it is synchronous, kind of maybe doing in-class assessments that are engaging, right? Having that conversation, maybe even doing something like integrating an AI that's listening to the conversation that two folks are having or a class is having, and offering kind of guidance on counterpoints to bring up, right? Using it kind of as a thought partner in that sense. But yeah, happy to elaborate on that as well.
Great, thank you. What questions you have? Eric?
You mentioned Nicholas, you mentioned using this as process and a series of prompts to move conversation forward. Can you think of an example off the top of your head where you might have some prompts leading to the product?
Yes, sorry. It was a little bit hard to hear. I kind of caught about a third of what you were saying. I'll just repeat kind of my understanding is what are kind of prompts specifically that lead to process over product. Was that it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Um, yeah, that's a really good question. So I think one of the things, a prompt that you could use is, say, hey, you are, in this prompt, you would give ChatGPT, you are a instructor that's goal was to walk students step by step. I think that using that wording is really helpful, step by step, through this problem. And then you can say, don't give the student or the user the answer at any point, and give them hints and kind of ideas of where to go forward. And again, you can do things like on ChatGPT, create a custom GPT, which is something that you could then share. And then another thing that I like to do, just kind of on the larger thing about prompting, you can have ChatGPT actually create your own prompts for you, right? So if I just wrote a couple notes of like, hey, I want this prompt to do this, then I can be like, hey, ChatGPT, can you help me create a prompt based off my intent, what I want to do? And what it'll do is it'll then kind of return that more highly formatted, more precise prompt that I can then put in to my system, and then that system, right, of having the prompt could be, right, to your point, emphasizing process over product, walking them through step by step. You can then use that and share it with students.
Thank you. We did have a question from someone online who said, what is one must-have AI embedded tool we should offer students? Is that give all students licenses for Chat GPT Professional? We have Gemini with our academic plan. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I'll give you my very, very honest take because this has been kind of a conversation at Yale as well. So what Yale has done is they've opted to build their kind of own what they call wall garden, which is essentially this system. They struck a deal with Microsoft and are striking deals independently with AI companies, and then they're using their API and kind of embedding it into their own system and calling it Yale Clarity Platform. So this is as opposed to just going to their websites natively, they wanted to create their own system. I think that's the wrong approach. And, of course, I've expressed this. And the reason why is because every time there's a new model that comes out, people want to use it. People kind of want to be at the forefront. But of course, the educational institution, Yale, has to strike a new deal with this new model, right? And there's a lot of kind of latency, unnecessary wasted time between when it comes out. And it ends up, right, making it so um ends up making it so Anthropic, say Claude 4 model was released, and like that's still not on there, I don't think, right? And what that has led to is students not using the Clarity platform, not just because that the newest models take a long time to come out, but also because the user interface isn't just as advanced as ChatGPT, right? The ChatGPT and Claude, they have engineers and designers working on this full time. Yale does not, right? So all of that is to say, I would advise against, oh, let's build our own kind of internal system, and instead just pick one of the providers, whether that's Google, Anthropic, or OpenAI, and partner with them. I would say specifically Anthropic or OpenAI would be the better option, just because I think they're more widely used than Gemini. Just by, and if I had to pick one, I mean they're both great, but I think ChatGPT is just really at the forefront, and it's what most students use anyway. So it's way more highly used than Anthropic's Claude, but they're both really great tools, as is Google.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Becky.
So I've seen in the media recently that like a lot of students are starting to push back about their faculty using AI. Since you've been in classrooms and it's being integrated like that, I was just curious, like, what are you hearing from peers? Do they think that when professors are using it, I don't know how, like, are they like almost like cheating? Like you're saying we can't use it, but you're using it. Like, what is the feel you're getting in your classroom?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question, and I think you may be referring to that. I think one article that went viral, I think it was at Northeastern or another institution, Yeah, I mean, I think it is really disheartening, honestly, like if I'm in a class, right, and I spend all this time on an essay and, really care about it, and then just kind of get, canned feedback, right? Um, I think that's really hard in the humanities and social sciences, maybe for STEM, right, where it's just, kind of one correct answer, that's fine. Um, but I don't think, to my knowledge, there's been like kind of like a expose, right, in the same way there was at Northeastern about a faculty at Yale using it. So there hasn't been kind of as much, that conversation really hasn't burgeoned in the same way it has nationally. Um, but in terms of like if that did happen to me and other students, I think, there would be kind of a lot of pushback, because, students really care about getting that authentic feedback. I think the middle ground, right, and the kind of point in which this article doesn't capture and others don't as well, is that I think where we harmonize is sort of a middle ground, right? So if there's say an issue and 10 students out of 20 or 50s, kind of essay, right, and it's like this like one thing that they didn't do right, that's like kind of a piece of canned feedback, right? Hey, you didn't do this part right, do this right next time. But so maybe kind of using that to share feedback to the masses. But in addition to that, and kind of necessarily adding kind of a personal note. Oh, I really love this or really like that, and I think it was really enriching. Um, so I think that's really the middle ground. Using AI to speed up the less important parts that maybe apply to everyone else, and then using it to still using your kind of knowledge to give that personalized support.
What do you think about, as a student operationally, how do you think universities can use AI in terms of outside the classroom? What are ways that, Yale's probably pretty sophisticated, but what are ways that, whether it be the enrollment process, whether it be financial aid, all these different things, what are ways you think from a student perspective that universities could be more efficient using AI?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's important to note, and in all honesty, right? You made a comment about Yale probably being really efficient. We're not, honestly. There's um um insofar as I think everyone, no matter where you are, no matter your budget, whatever it is kind of at this place where they're all learning, kind of collectively. Some folks may be ahead on their journey, others may be, kind of less ahead relatively. Um, but the main ways I've kind of been seeing it being used are, I think I saw like a meeting bot, kind of, or kind of a note taking bot join. Yeah, read AI meeting notes, right? So kind of tools like that. It's like, hey, like, if you're on a lot of calls, a lot of meetings, day to day, using something um, to really capture the meeting notes, and then saying, hey, can you summarize what, the meeting notes, and, send kind of the follow-up action items. That's been really popular. And I think it's really beneficial because it takes off a lot of the cognitive load and really enables you to just focus on that conversation without worrying about, forgetting to write down everything. Um, and then, kind of that dovetails into using it for emailing. So, I will say there has been a lot of pushback about, using it for emailing, because then sometimes like, the email is too kind of verbose, when it doesn't need to be. So I think that can be helpful, but just prompting it to be like, hey, keep it concise, don't use all this kind of extra language, maybe. Um, and then, I think for admissions and financial aid. Unfortunately, admissions is sort of a black box here. I wish I could ask. I don't think they would tell me. Um, but I will say I did want to kind of make a point, maybe I should have brought up earlier, is this there's been a conversation about like using AI text detectors. So a popular one is GPT-0. There's so many of them online. The issue is they have high false positive rates. And there was some research that even showed, and this has been kind of shown and verified again, that AI detectors, because of the way they work, unfairly discriminate against ESL and neurodiverse students. And I think that's really important to take note of, right? Because, this kind of dovetails to kind of my earlier note about transparency, right? If it's kind of a punitive relationship where it's like, kind of cat and mouse, that's not serving anyone. And instead, how can we reframe it as like, I'm not actually, me as being the professor, I'm not trying to catch you. I'm trying to help you develop your critical thinking. And I want to hear what you think will be useful. And I think that that idea of just opening up that conversation brings up this idea of like, co-creation, right? At the pedagogical level, which I think can also just be really useful as well.
Great. I think that answered my question.
Perfect. Resource that is reliable, checking data.
Yeah, we do have a question for you.
With the daily increases in enhancement in AI, catching AI generated content, seems to be, extremely difficult. Has there been discussion about tools that faculty can use to check for AI generated content?
Yeah, certainly. So, there have been discussions. Yale and some other schools, I think Vanderbilt was one of them, MIT was one of them. I think, there's I think like 10, 15 schools actually turned off this feature and Turnitin that detects AI content, right? So they kind of sided on the side of of research, right? Insofar as there was a lot of false positives, and rather than trying, kind of using the tools, opening up that conversation. But that is to say, they're also like true positives, right? Like the tools actually can capture AI generated text. In terms of the ones that work, I mean, I think one of the most popular ones, it was created by a student at Princeton, who's now graduated, is GPT-0. They've really kind of been at the forefront. But again, I will say that with the core caveat of, if I think it's easy to just pop it in, right? And that's a temptation, right? To just be like, hey, is this AI generated or not, and come up with a binary answer. But I think the chain of events that happens after that is really important, right? Is that used as kind of just a piece of information to keep in mind of, hey, these, follow these kind of structures? Is it used as a kind of to bring it to like, to penalize them and give them a bad grade? How is that information used? I don't think the information itself is bad to have. I just think how it's used, right? Whether the route of punitive or for transparency, for growth and, progress, I think the latter is the better route.
Yeah, we use Turnitin as well.
Yeah.
Like you guys do.
Yeah.
Other questions? We had an online question. Let me read that to you real quick.
Perfect.
From a cognitive perspective, what type of assignments stimulate critical thinking in the way we can use ChatGPT or any AI embedded tool?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Kind of what tools specifically use simulate?
What type of assignments stimulate critical thinking in the way we can use AI in a classroom?
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back, and I'll share something momentarily to kind of help illuminate this on my screen, if that's okay. I don't know.
Sure.
I have screen sharing permissions. Awesome. It's, I think, essentially grading students on the chat, right? So give them the assignment, hey, like, I want you to do this, maybe economics problem set, but I kind of want you to walk me through it step by step. The core part is like, that students aren't passive, right? And just kind of like, yes, 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 and just get closer to the answer, but actively engaging, which is hard. In terms of what assessments simulate, or assignments simulate critical thinking, I think having students, right, talk with a voice tool, and then kind of, the teacher sent the transcript or whatever, however it's kind of, transmitted. And then I think also, in-person, in-class assessments when possible, right? Where there's just no electronic use is also good to, mix in with, AI augmented assignments. And then, yeah, then just kind of like, live presentations, I think one of the biggest things with AI is it's, enabled us to kind of just rethink pedagogy as a whole, and like how it's being implemented, because, AI is kind of coming into conflict with, what tools and strategies are currently implemented. So how can we use it to really re-emphasize different skills that are useful to students? So when students are having that voice conversation with AI or doing that presentation, especially in the presentation end, they have to think about their body language and their eye contact, all these, other parts that I think are, conducive to, just being a better public speaker and stuff, which I think is the ultimate goal. But I did want to share, to really bring this to light, just going to share my screen quickly. Awesome. So this is something built in collaboration with a Yale professor, or rather for a Yale Italian professor. And essentially what it is a tool that has the PDF embedded, and it has a PDF embedded. It has kind of different assessments. And most importantly, there's an AI that has full understanding and kind of walks you through step by step. So let me actually get a live version. Just 1 second. Oh, there we go. So this is essentially right now in tutor mode. So the point of the AI is to tutor and walk me through step by step. So as you can see, here's a textbook, right? This Italian textbook. And the AI has all of that content in its mind, or imaginary mind. So let me just really center this for a moment here. So how do I say hello and goodbye in Italian, right? So this is specifically for an Italian introductory course that's being generated. So it kind of gives me, ciao, and I can't pronounce this because I don't speak Italian, but there's a formal way to say goodbye. Then also you can say ciao as well. But see, as you can see, now the AI prompts me. Now let's put this into practice. Can you try to create a simple dialogue? So I say, ciao bello. I don't know what that means. Honestly, I've kind of just heard it. But if I just enter it here, it's great to see you're engaging with Italian. Right now it's saying, hey, is there any exercise I want to work on? Which is really interesting. Now, if we shift over to the language partner, if I say, what are common mistakes with reading, right? It's going to treat me kind of like as a peer, right? Talk to me in Italian. But let's say, hey, I don't understand what you're saying. Understand what you are saying. Can you write in English? Then it could, modify its own, um, you know, uh, discourse to, or, kind of content to say, yeah, I just wanted to practice Italian with you. Right. And then it's saying, oh, I was in Italian market last weekend. What about you? What did you do over the weekend? I went to the farmer's market too. Right. So this kind of this bot has full understanding of all the content, all the vocab in chapter 2. So if I want to say, I want to learn activities, right? Then it can kind of help walk me through that. So this is like this form, right? Where it's like, essentially what this tool does is it sends this, entire chat to the professor, and then it kind of grades it dynamically with the professor's kind of learning goals, priorities, things like that. So this is kind of a flavor of some of the other tools. And then another tool, this is kind of one that I built before, is called the Luciano Flirty bot. So we have a kind of professor here who writes a lot about AI ethics, philosophy, and he is very busy, and he wanted to essentially build something to help people get more access to his content, right, and better understand it. So essentially, you can ask his own chatbot, and then I'll explain his concepts. So these are, and this is something I released to the Yale community, and kind of to the broader public, so you can access it for free. But these kind of tools, right, where you're creating these AI with custom knowledge, bringing it at the level of the user. So for, the Italian 1, it was students, and Italian 110. For here, it's, maybe other philosophers or just even the general public who want to learn about AI ethics. Those are kind of two examples that I personally built that, I think are conducive to that.
Great, thanks.
So going back to the basics, is anyone developing course content to teach faculty and end users how to get started in utilizing AI?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, or interesting question. I'm not seeing kind of a wealth of that. My company, Mylon, has done that with Yale and kind of some other institutions as well. So we kind of support faculty in that. There's a lot of content online, I'll say, a lot of free content, but of course, the secret sauce is, it kind of really being put into practice with someone who knows what they're doing. So yeah, I think I'll share this one website that I just kind of know. It's called AI for Education, and they're dedicated really to AI literacy, and they have a lot of great content. I think they focus more on K through 12 specifically, but they have resource hubs, right? So they have free courses that you can just use to learn. I can just drop this in the chat if that's helpful. But yeah, there's some open source content, but in terms of specialized providers, yeah, it's a little bit more limited, but there's some folks who do it.
Garrett, go ahead.
Nick, what are your thoughts on kind of where we're at with current models and utilizing AI as sort of a source for truth? The question asking, because I know there's been a lot of concern, especially with policy and how to implement this at higher education, where we may implement an AI tool in a classroom or with our processes, and someone asks it a question and there's either a hallucination or the truth that it has isn't the full truth, and so the person takes that information as the truth and they make decisions based off of it, and there's obviously issues that fall from that. So do you have thoughts on that, or how can we implement that better locally? Where are we at with models being able to avoid that? Lots of questions.
Yeah, those are all great questions. So yeah, to your point, I think unfortunately, just like humans, AI, makes mistakes. The issue is, as humans, we can kind of convey uncertainty. AI does not do that. So it'll state things that are untrue with complete certainty, which is a little jarring for us to, encounter. In terms of like how do we kind of reduce hallucinations, or hallucinations means kind of misinformation that the AI kind of outputs accidentally, right? Because of just the data body of data. In terms of how we can reduce it, there's now kind of a web search tool that's imbued into ChatGPT, into Google, into some of these other models. So, for things that are, time sensitive or just timely, or, have probably literature on the internet, I would definitely, turn on that like web search feature so it can really just verify that. In terms of where we're at with models on a larger scale, I think it's, day by day, the hallucinations are going down, especially because of the web search tool and just, AI just thinking, kind of having more computational power and just having better training data. But I think the core thing, and, to answer your question of like, how do we deal with it in the classroom and handle it? I think it really goes back to this term that I mentioned earlier, AI literacy. I think that should be, kind of it's one of the, kind of pillars of what we're doing at Yale's Purview Center and just ITS, like throughout the campus, is like, how can we foster AI literacy? And what that really means on a more micro level is being able to do things like spot hallucinations, right? Is being not just a consumer, but a critical user of AI, so that you're approaching it with skepticism, right? Healthy skepticism, of course, but you're really thinking about, oh, this is something that an AI in the past has, maybe fabricated, or I've seen an example of this, right? AI literacy, I think, besides being able to catch hallucinations, is also kind of knowing what what are the right tools to use. So of course we know these like, kind of more more kind of horizontal tools like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini that can do these larger things. But there's also a tool, say, called Gamma, right? GAMMA, that helps you create presentations with AI. Or let's say you want to try out some like voice AI tool. There's a tool called 11 Labs, which is really advanced in voice AI and can help you kind of create the agents that I described earlier. So AI literacy, I think, is being a healthy skeptic, and also, some a consumer of AI, that doesn't kind of infringe on your critical thought, while also knowing for this use case, here's what the right tool to go to.
Great. Other question? I got one more for you. Like, I don't think we can think 5 years down the road. If we said in the next 2 years, from a student perspective, what does higher education look like? And I'm just ask a question, what is the value to students when I can get a tutor from AI? So how do we use these technologies, but also provide value to the students, whether it's relationally, having those conversations one-on-one, stuff like that? What does that look like? And for us, that's who we're worried about. How do we take this to be successful with everything changing so quickly? ChatGPT hasn't been out that long. What does that look like? And if you were the president of MacU, how would you use it to provide value to students when they want to come here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To maybe take a broader scope first and then go more narrow of just like the value of higher education. I've thought a lot about this, kind of as a student, and I think really, the learning, you brought up an important point, like students can learn online, right? They can, their free courses online, like why even go to college? I actually think it's about the community, right? And the ability to be a part of a larger community, find a sense of identity and belonging, and learn through others, right? I would personally say my most formative experiences, and maybe some folks share this as well, is like just conversations that I've had with peers, right? That have really just, friends I've met at college that have really just changed the way I thought about it. So I think on that note, right, how can we foster and across higher ed more of these, close relationships between students and, faculty and students, and really just give that personalized support. In terms of what is the value, for students, and or I guess my vision for 2 years from now, I think it's really important that all schools, right? And I really want to emphasize, like, this is something that, you know, every institution is struggling with and doesn't kind of know what the right answer is, because there's no one right answer, of course. And kind of on that note, right? I think the value for students is, to really be able to learn with AI as a tool that, kind of augments their current ability. Because the truth is, if students go into kind of knowledge work, primarily, there's going to be an expectation on, the requirements that they know how to use ChatGPT, that they have AI literacy, to my point, right? Know the right tools for each use case, know how to, consume it in the right way, and to kind of steer it in the right way. So I would love to see, across my, if I was a student, right, or at your university or even at any university, I would want to see, my teacher having an open conversation about AI on the first day of class, right? Hey, this is something that exists. How are we going to deal with it? Here's what I want, right? That will leave kind of a good taste in my mouth of like, oh, wow, this is actually being thought of, and, in a way that is, productive. And I want to see the professor encouraging students to be generative about what are good ways to use it. Giving them that agency, I think, is so important. How can, whether that maybe is different forms of assessment of, or that they can pick from, right, for a final project, or, just new methods that they haven't encountered. And that's really the goal. The goal is that, like, if I entered, college tomorrow next year, right, with no understanding or experience about AI, I could have a class a semester at least, right, out of my, say, 4 to 5 classes that really leans into it. And the thing is, at Yale, part of the reason it's, part of the approach is, because of the agency that faculty have, the Poorvu Center's job, teaching learning center is only to advise, right? And so, at the end of the day, I'm making these suggestions, but it really comes down to, and maybe the same, right? Does the faculty have an interest in, engaging with AI as something that can be part of their classroom? So I would really just try to spark that question as much and as many kind of faculty, as possible. And how would I be, like I'm thinking about kind of more concretely 2 years if I was the president of your institution, and I think having on the ITS part, right? I guess I'll start with like I think signing a partnership with one of these big AI companies and giving students access. The core issue, right, is equity of access, or one of the core issues, and just equity or kind of prerequisite knowledge that they bring in. So I would be thrilled. Like I would really love if Yale today signed in a partnership with OpenAI. I think that would be great. And in the same way, I think you should pick up one provider, right? Trust that they're going to release, frontier models, and Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI all are, right? They have enough money to keep going, and encourage students to dive into the platforms, right? To be comfortable with it. And it's interesting because it's like, one of the things that's been really hard at Yale is because, they have this like zero data retention policy for the kind of internal AI tool that we have, right? Which, as I mentioned before, is like not the direct platforms, but just like the API kind of like integration. There's this association that even though they say there's data retention policy, that Yale is going to see it, right? That, admin and faculty are going to see that you're using it in this way, and that's maybe not allowed, right? And so there's that fear, right? And I think that fear exists even if it's, you sign an enterprise contract with OpenAI, right? Because you're logged in with your .macu email, there's this notion that everyone's gonna have access to it. So really destigmatizing and kind of disproving that, like, hey, this is your workspace, right? We want you to use it. We don't want you to pay for another subscription. Like this is the one that you can use for, schoolwork and everything like that. And I think that's really interesting, right? Because the reason I bring it up is because what that's led to and kind of, is like a lot of students just using, even though Yale pays a lot of money for, different providers, students are just using their own accounts, even if they're free, right? Which of course is not good for anyone. And in terms of just more concretely, right? So maybe, on the ITS side, sign an enterprise contract, running workshops and professional development, on the admin and, just kind of, awareness, for faculty too. But on the, kind of more teaching and learning end, I think, right, you know, enabling or having workshops for faculty where, folks are brought in who've done assessment redesign before, who, have kind of done this and kind of give examples in more practical ways. So yeah, those two kind of branches, but I'm happy to expand if on any of those.
Well, that's great. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any final questions before we finish up? Great. Well, thank you, Nicholas. We appreciate your insight. It's been very valuable in helping us as we think about this. So we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope this was interesting or helpful or something in between. And yeah, I'm happy to drop my email if or anyone wants to ask me, question. Yeah.
Great. All right. Thank you, Nicholas.
All right. Thank you so
See you.
much.
All right. Bye.